Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Hello, problem solvers. Lend us an ear or two as you work through your Rubik's Cubes, Sudoku, grids and jigsaw puzzles. Don't stop tickering away. We just want to take one of your ears or two of them, maybe, so that, hell, welcome to Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matt, put down that crossword now and say hello to the good people.
Well, I'm intrigued. What's the technique around jigsaw puzzles? Is there a technique? I've got a special technique.
Yeah, absolutely, I've got a technique.
But when you see the Jigsaw Puzzle World Championships, are they just naturally good? Are they practice jigsaw puzzles? I mean, my technique is maybe a bit labour intensive, but I like the edge. I like the whole outside edge.
I think everyone does the edge, but
right.
I don't necessarily wait till I've completed the edge before I start digging into the middle. I'm looking for the big things in the jigsaw puzzle picture.
Yep.
To start slotting those things together, and then you can sort of smush them together with the edge. And, you know, if you're doing a 3,000 or 4,000 piece jigsaw puzzle, some of those edge pieces hide very, very well.
They do, don't they? Sneaky little things.
For sure.
And my wife just seems to pick up pieces and go, oh, that goes there.
Yes.
Whereas I'm methodical, and sometimes I'll get the stage where I pick out the one lump, one hole, like as in a lump up and a hole to the right and then a hole to the bottom and a lump to the left, and I start sorting the pieces by the shape.
Yeah, you can do that towards the end. You can't do that in the start.
No, not the start. No, that's right. But they do have world championships, so I do wonder.
Do they?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm putting my name down.
Well, I don't think I'm very good at it, so I'm not going to put my name down for it because I just think I'm too methodical.
Well, I can
my
see
wife
what your wife does because, you know, you'll be looking for a piece and you know there's a little red dot on this piece and there's no other red dots in the rest of the picture. So you're just looking for this little red dot on a pic, and then you see that red dot and you go, aha, boom, and you can slot it straight.
Yeah. She doesn't even do the edge first. I mean, that's how random she is.
Wow.
So she just picks them up and I'm going, no, let's do the edge. No, just pick up, that one goes there and that one goes there.
That does nothing for someone with OCD.
No, that's right. I go, no, darling, stop, go away. Let me do the edge first. Now, we talked about...
the jigsaw puzzle fights, yeah.
That's right.
Sorry.
We talked about the Nintendo Museum, the new Nintendo Museum in Kyoto.
Yes.
And so that sounded like a lot of fun, and we talked about the fact that they've been around since 1889, I think it was. We talked about that. And it just so happens I've got to duck over to Japan for a quick trip coming up, and I went, I'm not that far. I'm only about an hour from Kyoto on the Shinkansen, so I went, I'm going to duck down to that Nintendo Museum. That sounds like fun. We've talked about it. Why not?
And play some Mario Kart.
That's right. Well, do whatever, because as you remember, there were 10 tokens and you get those a bit random, so you may get to play some Mario games or maybe not. So I thought that'd be interesting, and I'll go down. So I jumped online to see how you get in and what days it's open, etc. There is a 3-month waiting list.
What?
To go in the ballot, not to buy a ticket.
So you're going to ballot to a museum to get a ticket for a museum?
For 3 months in advance.
Yeah.
Now, I'm putting this down to the popularity of Tech Talk because obviously people have listened to this in Japan.
Yes, they've heard and the word's gotten out.
That's right. They've booked out. But the next time
surely we can get a cut of the profits.
Well, maybe. That's right. It should be fair. 10% we'll take. So January 2025 is the next available time that I can enter the ballot to maybe get a ticket. And then if I'm lucky enough to be drawn out in the ballot in January 2025, then I get to pay for the ticket.
I think the message is don't base your entire holiday to Japan around your trip to, unless you've definitely secured tickets well in advance.
I think that's the problem. And then they do also say if someone cancels on the day, then we do have some last minute tickets. But the likelihood of that, if you've waited 3 months to get there, you're going to need something pretty serious.
You got people checking that website every morning.
Oh, absolutely right. So I'd like to go there, but this next trip, no, I'm going in a couple of weeks' time. So
how's the ballot looking for June 2027?
Maybe I'll get to go there.
Yeah. All right.
Anyway, great to see people focused on their
they love their Nintendo
outcomes.
Museum. Well, in today's episode, we'll take a look at automating the farming lifestyle and how Australia is leading the charge. We're also looking to bring superhero comic books to life. That is to real life, folks. An exciting development there for anyone who ran around the backyard as a 7-year-old defeating supervillains. And we'll take a peek at the Tesla robot. They've kicked a goal with this one yet? Well, maybe not. We'll let you decide. But enough with the teasers. Let's dig in with our first story, all about sustainability. Now, a common theme on this program, going by our stories in the past, is well, everything old is new again. And today, in our first story, we are looking at a turnaround in the building industry, moving away from steel and back into timber. Now, we're not talking just small-scale single-story buildings here. No, the sky's the limit, and we're now building skyscrapers out of timber, Matt.
Just sounds crazy, doesn't it?
Skyscrapers.
Skyscrapers out of timber. Now, if we go way back and think about those earliest buildings that were made back in, say, Egyptian pyramid time, Mesopotamian ziggurats, that sort of thing, wood, stone, mud were kind of the materials you had available to you, and probably more stone and mud, and then a bit of wood came along.
And a bit of straw.
Maybe a bit of straw, that's right, especially for a little piggy. And so that was fine, and we built buildings to a certain size, and then we found timber was pretty good because we could build buildings a little bit better, a little bit different with timber, but then we found that maybe fires weren't so great when you had timber as the main framework of your building. But a big change occurred in 1885, and that's when often it was seen as the change for the skyscrapers, the construction industry. The home insurance building in Chicago, often regarded as the world's first skyscraper, 10 stories high. Doesn't sound like a skyscraper, but back then when most buildings weren't 10 stories high, and they used steel and concrete. Huge breakthroughs.
Yeah, right.
Imagine having that steel framework, which is obviously a bit better than timber, and then concrete. Yeah, wow, what a great idea. So
it wasn't long before they'd actually started on the Rockefeller Center after that. And I think
I was thinking of the Empire State Building, 1931, the Empire State
Building. And those famous photos of those guys sitting out on those
girders.
beams, on girders and whatnot, and just perched in very precarious positions, only a couple of 100 metres up in the air.
I know, that gives me sweaty palms just thinking about those pictures. So we've got those, we've got the Sears Tower. So we had these unbelievable buildings, and we're still building them now. When you think about some buildings like the one in Dubai, for example, people keep reaching higher and higher. But the issue here is steel and concrete have environmental consequences. The production of concrete is responsible for about 6% of all global carbon emissions. Quite incredible. The production of steel adds about 5%. So building skyscrapers, and obviously steel and concrete are used for other things besides skyscrapers, but using that for skyscrapers is an environmental impact. So let's turn back to timber. Now we think you're not going to build skyscrapers of that height with timber, surely. But we've now got some timber that's a bit like the old chipboard. And I can remember my dad was a builder, so I'd use chipboard and craftwood, and you just have sheets that were just perfect, and you just use those, but they weren't necessarily that strong. They were put together nice and flat and even, but they weren't really that strong. But we've now got cross-laminated timber, CLT, and they're using that for basically the framework. And so we're talking about now already having buildings up to, there's a new Ascent building that's being built that's 25 stories high, made of timber. Timber, I say, timber.
See, I'm a big fan of this. I come from a family where forestry was a big deal.
Yeah, right.
And this is, we're sucking carbon dioxide out of the air and stacking it into the lignin wood fibres. Then we should be using this. And I think, there is such a thing as sustainable forestry, and I'm a big fan of this. I mean, the Law Acts did nothing for forestry, obviously, and there are some really emotive connotations out of that sort of imagery. Yeah. But selective logging is a possibility. You can do it. It's good for the animals that live in the forest. Yeah, I'm all for this.
And you can keep growing trees.
Yes.
Sure, you've got to plant it. There's a long time frame, but you can keep growing trees.
Well, and trees stack on timber or take carbon dioxide out of the air to make lignin fibres, and they do it fastest for the first 25 years.
Well, there you go.
When trees get older than that, they start to get imperfections, which are good for animals to live in. Right. So you can leave old trees, but you can take young trees and you can harvest young trees, and
So they've actually changed the International Building Code to allow mass timber is the term, mass timber buildings up to 18 stories. But as I said, there's that Milwaukee one, 25 stories. You've got an 18-story building in Norway. So you've got around the world so far about 84 mass timber buildings have been completed that are over 8 stories high. So that's pretty impressive. Now, fire is the first thing I thought of. Well, this is great. You've got this cross-laminated timber CLT, and you think, well, that's fantastic, but surely it just burns, and so that's not going to be good.
Yeah, that's going to be a worry.
For the first fire that comes along to a 25-story building or an 18-story building. But apparently the way they construct that, the outside of the actual timber beams chars up, So
Yeah.
it makes it fire resistant, and the inside structural component stays there, which may, now testing still going on, this may actually be better than some fires in steel buildings where the steel buckles and warps as it changes shape with different temperatures. So it actually might be okay. So the old images of those high buildings, maybe not skyscrapers, but high buildings but made of timber just going up in flames and racing through the building, then supposedly that's not going to happen. They're lighter than steel and concrete buildings, so your foundations don't need to be as big. You do need more volume. The structural strength of the timber is better per kilogram than steel, but volume-wise, you've got more volume for the timber.
Right.
So they need to be a bit different. But they're at the point now where they're almost IKEA-ing, if it's a verb, skyscrapers. So they'll
So your
actually...
skyscraper comes in a flat pack.
Correct. You just basically put it together.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Maybe not made by IKEA, but basically doing that type of thing. So it does sound like a complete change in the way we would think about things. Would I be comfortable going to a skyscraper made of timber? Well, if it conforms to all the codes, sure. It doesn't sound right because you want steel because it feels like it's strong and concrete. But having a timber building, it looks a bit different as well. But this is where we're headed.
It's interesting that what you said about the fire resistance and charcoal only burns once. I understand that the Chinese for a while were using wooden tiles on the outside of their rockets, their space-borne rockets for the re-entry. So they burn once when they as they're re-entering, and then that's it. Yeah, but anyway.
It's a good way to get lots of that timber out of, or lots of that CO2, out of the environment in trees, and then keep it contained within those buildings.
And then you can grow more trees where you didn't have trees before.
Exactly right.
Look, I think this is excellent sustainability. Forestry works when it's organised. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, fantastic.
Pig butchering scams. Now, that term doesn't sound particularly pleasant. And truth be told, the act isn't very nice either. It's the latest style of fleecing the unsuspecting, i.e. that's most of us, out of our hard-earned cash. Matt, what do we need to be on the lookout for now with pig butchering scams?
Everything. We haven't done a scam story for a while. I'm trying to stay away from them. But this one was just getting so bad.
People need to know. Yeah.
They do. Yep. So the term pig butchering comes from the theme of a piggery, where you take along some nice young piggies and you fatten them up and then slaughter them. And that's exactly what happens with the pig butchering scam. They build trust with someone and they take their time doing that and then they slaughter them for all their money. So it's one that's actually gotten a lot less in terms of the time frame. The average pig butchering scam used to be 271 days. So it was a long play. It was someone you would build trust with over months and months and months, and then finally it hit them. And I'll tell you about the scam they'd hit with in the end. But that's now decreased to an average of about 42 days, which is still a long play, because you think a scammer's just going to try and get me today. But 42 days, so over a month, maybe 6 or 7 weeks, a month and a half, people are building up that trust, and it takes a little bit of time to build that trust, and then bang, they're hitting them with them. And so what are they doing with that?
So with most scams, we can, the cluey amongst us can spot them, but then we know they wouldn't be doing them if they weren't catching anyone.
Yeah.
But for the cluey people, they're lost. But if you can get those cluey people and you can lure them in, well,
Correct.
There's a real prize.
And it netted $75 billion across the world. This is called the UN, across the world so far. But Southeast Asia is where the hotspot is. And they say in 2023 alone, somewhere in the vicinity of 18 billion to 37 billion. Now, again, it's a bit variable there because how many of those are reported? We don't know about all the ones. We don't know about the unreported, but a lot of money, basically. So what they'll do is use a lot of new AI tools to create this image, this idea that you and I are best friends. I think you're a really nice person and you will gain trust in me because I'm very nice to you. Now, I can use AI tools to break down language barriers so I can actually make sure I'm speaking proper English, not a broken English, for example, that I might do if English isn't my first language. So I can get rid of that. I can use deep fakes for photos. I can have real-time conversations, video conversations with you by using AI face swapping technology. So you and I can have a conversation and then I can have a conversation with the next person and it's a different face and no one knows my real face. So all these different things are happening. And then the twist at the end, so after I built this trust with you, because we're chatting about everything, we're chatting about my kids and talking about my job and talking about what sort of things I did on the weekend, I then say, I got into this great investment the other day and I got told about it by a friend and I dropped $1,000 into it. It was a crypto investment. I was a bit skeptical, but I can't believe it. A week later, it was worth $2,000. Fantastic. And I leave it at that. And then I keep going on, and then I talk about it again, and then, oh, what's that one you're investing in? Oh, it's called this. Look, I can give you a contact if you like. Oh, that'd be nice, thanks. And so you put a bit of money in, and it comes back a couple of weeks later, a bit more money, because it's just a fake website. You can go and look at that and see your balance. And so then you go, well, I might put some more in. I might take some money out of my superannuation. I'll put that in. And before you know it, people are putting in not $1,000, tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, because they've built up so much trust with this person. So the big issue here is that governments are struggling with this because there's so many of these that are going across borders. It's hard to police things in your own nation. Forget about the fact when you've got all of these nations across the world that are trying to capture these, trying to have some sort of collaboration amongst police forces for all these scams that are going on. And then how do you prove it when you're putting this money in crypto wallets and you've got to be able to get access to those? How do you get access to those? You haven't got a central authority like a bank that you can say, here's a subpoena, I want to see the information about these bank accounts. So it makes it hard. But, I mean, the pandemic did obviously lots of terrible things.
Yeah.
One of the things it did do is it accelerated online scamming, because some of those criminals that were involved in other criminal activities before, well, the pandemic shut them down as well, so they turned to all of this. So pig butchering, be as alert as you can be about it. It's happening out there, it's real, it's costing people a lot of money, and people that you think, I'm not going to fall for that, sometimes fall for this sort of thing.
Yeah, and particularly when it's the long game, as you say.
Yeah, the long game, that's the thing. You expect a scam to try and hit you with something today and try and get your money today. They're asking for money up front.
Click on this link and oh, goodness me. Now, I don't know about you, but as an 8-year-old, excuse me, the idea of flying through the air down the main street of town, swinging on a strand of spiderweb, well, that was just about the coolest thing you could possibly have imagined. Now, comic book and Hollywood fantasy have been behind several developments in technology over the years. Your phone came out of Star Trek, your smartwatch from Dick Tracy. It seems that if you can dream something, and I mean, pardon me once again, I mean anything, well, then an engineer somewhere will take it as a personal challenge. Matt, dust off your Lycra bodysuit. With great power comes great responsibility. Indeed,
indeed. So I actually think of the Richie Rich comics, because
video
calls. Because Richie Rich,
right, okay.
That was such a cool concept that they had the phone calls.
Well, that was Jetsons people as well, video calls. Yeah.
So lots of things.
So we're doing those now.
You're right.
Par for the course.
Again, it's pretty easy to imagine something and draw it in a cartoon, but to make it real is a bit harder. So swinging from building to building, grabbing hold of a car and dragging it to you, or saving a car from hitting a young child with things that shoot out of your wrists.
Yeah.
And that sounds pretty cool, but it does sound like a fantasy. And
but
I remember,
it seems like that's never going to happen ever.
That's right.
And someone said, really? Well, there's a challenge for me.
Challenge accepted. And the closest I've seen before is that one of the Christmases for our kids, one of the kids got Spiderman outfit, and they had these little bits of foam that shot out from underneath their wrist there, which just stained our pavers. That was all it did.
Well, can I share with you? I had a little little rubber dart launcher with a suction cup on the end of it and a string.
And a string. That's not bad. That's not
so
bad.
I tried swinging from it, and that was terrible.
Good. So, Tufts University, for no reason that I can ascertain at this particular point in time, has come up with a web-slinging device that shoots silk fibres that solidify in midair and stick to things.
Shut the front door. It's all bets are off now. This is fantastic.
Now, as with so many things, as with penicillin, X-rays, microwave oven, even Viagra, all these things came about by accident. They were working on one thing and accidentally they came up with something that's incredibly useful.
And so no one got bitten by a radioactive spider in this case?
No, they didn't. And maybe they should add that in, because it's not perfect yet, but they were trying to work on an adhesive project, and they came up with this web-like substance, and it's got acetone in it. So it's a liquid form when it's in your container on the wrist, and when it shoots out, that acetone evaporates, turning the rest of the substance into a solid, but it then becomes sticky.
Yeah, right.
Before you get too excited, a couple of minor issues here.
No, I'm too late. I'm already excited.
Oh, sorry. The fibres can lift objects up to 80 times their weight. And you go, wow, that's impressive. But the fibres are very light. So, two problems with lifting up a car. First of all, 80 times their weight, well, it might be a few grams in weight, so it might lift up, maybe 80 grams or maybe 150 grams.
Right.
So not a car. And by the way, I can't lift a car. Whether I've got a little bit of something attached to that car or just trying to lift up a car, I can't lift a car. So you might need the radioactive Spider regardless to give you the strength. So minor issue
with
there.
that idea.
The other minor issue is at the moment it works to a distance of about 12 centimetres. So not exactly swinging from building to building.
Okay.
I'm trying to bring you down slowly here.
That's all right.
But it's a start. So we're getting somewhere. What I can't quite work out, and I've looked at the story and I've read a couple of other things about it and I've looked up Tufts University, I can't work out the practical application. Now, is that important? Probably not at this stage.
No, you can still shoot spider webs
That's
from
right.
your wrist.
That's right. But somewhere, someone will go, hey, you know what? We could do this with that. Because sometimes the discovery itself doesn't have the end goal in mind. Maybe they do, but someone else comes along with another end goal. They keep building on the previous information.
These people didn't mix this stuff with it to make it hold 4,000
That's
times
right.
the weight.
And now lift a car.
Yeah.
That's right. So it's interesting, but material science, robotics, this is the whole world we're moving towards. So I think we're going to do something with this in a few years' time, if for no other reason than to make Spider-Man outfits really, really cool.
It's going to make your superhero party the real hit. Now, with Christmas coming up, it's time for the next generation to get their hands on a Rubik's Cube. Now, in the 80s, every house had one. In 2024, every house should have one. And if you already have one, well, I'll bet you that it's not a microcube. A new microcube is the next must-have in anyone's Rubik's Cube collection. Matt, let's see you solve this one blindfolded and using only your toes.
That might be a bit more of a challenge than I'm happy to accept. The Rubik's Cube turns 50 this year.
What better way to celebrate it than making it really small?
That's right. And I've seen small ones before. I used to have some hanging on a key ring at one stage. So they were small-ish and they were still workable. That's fine. This one has gone small on steroids. Probably not the right analogy there because it's kind of the opposite of going big. So the opposite of steroids.
Super dehydrated.
That's the one. It's been made very small. And it's a part of the nod to Erno Rubik, who came up with the concept back in 1974. Of course, no one knew about it in 1974. It took till 1980 when the Ideal Toy Corporation licensed the concept, and that's when the world exploded with Rubik's Cube. Actually, I think Rubik called it the Magic Cube initially, so he wasn't so egotistical to name it after himself, but the Ideal Toy Corp said, no, Rubik's Cube sounds better than Magic Cube, so away we go, because it's not really magic, is it? So I suppose that makes sense. So as a nod to Erno Rubik, then Mega House Corp have collaborated with Ariso Precision Company to make this officially smallest Rubik's Cube in the world. It's got the Guinness World Record for the smallest cube in the world, and we've got a new distance measurement here, as we keep introducing new SI units.
How many swimming pools is this?
Well,
football fields?
That might be a bit challenging, so we've gone the other way. This is the size of 3 grains of rice.
Oh, right.
Now, I don't think that's a great measurement tool because are they the length-to-length grains of rice or side-to-side grains of rice?
Yeah, or is it long grain or is it short grain?
Oh, no. So
basmati?
I don't love the measurement tool they've used. I've gone with 0.5 centimetres.
Okay.
Per side, or how about 5 millimetres?
Okay,
how about we go with something
5 millimetres.
a little bit more accepted in the normal SI units? That's tiny. So to solve it, and it is solvable, it works, it spins, it moves, but you need tweezers and a microscope to actually move it around and solve
it. Or really small toes.
That's right, maybe really, really small toes. Because if you think about it, it's 5 millimetres side to side, then each row is probably a bit over, 1.66666 millimetres in length. So not very long is the bottom line there. So
this is easily going to get kicked under the lounge, isn't it?
Absolutely
fall off
right.
the coffee table and you'll never see it again.
So it's 1,000th the size of the original 3x3 cube. Some of the components inside are 0.0001 millimetres in size. Not sure how many grains of rice that is. And they've got etching on them with these micro cutting tools. They've got the Rubik's logo etched onto them.
Wow.
It really is just showing off something that you can say, isn't this cool? So when I heard about this, my kids are always challenged about what to get me for Christmas presents. They go, you've got everything you need, Dad, and you're up to date with the technology. What can we get you? So I sent them a link and said, here's what you can get me for Christmas. I didn't actually see whether you could buy it or not, but you can actually buy it, but I'm not sure that the kids will get it for me because at this stage, the cube is marketed at being about 8,400 Australian dollars.
Oh, wow.
That comes with a case to display it in. So it's not just the cube you get for that.
And it's an enormous case the size of a bookshelf.
That's right. So you're going to have somewhere, look at this, draw attention. So I'm not convinced the kids will get it for me. I would like to play with it. you got to get the tweezers out to play with it. I would like to play with it just to see how well it turns. But it's based on aluminium. It's been cut with, again, some laser cutters to get it to the right size. And they started the design for this way back in 2022.
Wow.
So they thought a long way ahead to go, hey, 50th anniversary, what can we do? Let's make it really tiny. So I just
And if you cheat and pull it apart, the risk of losing a bit.
Well, if the cube's that small, imagine some of those pieces. No, I don't think that's a good idea. So
And you can't pull the stickers off.
Well, that'd be better than pulling it apart, I think. But made of aluminium, I'm not sure how much that would flex. With the old plastic ones, when you pull them apart, you could flex it back in. But aluminium's probably not going to flex as much. I don't actually know how they get it all together in the first place.
If you pull this one apart, you're not getting it back together.
No, I don't think so. And by the way, at $8,400, don't pull it apart. So it's a good celebration of the Rubik's legacy, but also a display of precision engineering. And I actually still do travel with a Rubik's Cube in my backpack when I get on planes, whatever. I just like to have that.
Well, it's an excellent form of meditation.
Well, it's actually quite nice just to play with that while you're coming land sometimes when you're meant to put your computers away, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if I'm going to... It does take a little bit of room in my backpack. My wife sometimes says, your backpack's too full, get rid of that Rubik's Cube. And I say, I'd prefer to get rid of my travelling companion, darling wife, than my Rubik's Cube. Doesn't go down so well. But this one I could probably take with me a little bit easier. Maybe there's a middle ground there somewhere. Maybe I could find something just a little bit bigger than this one.
Now, it's been around for a little while, but how are you feeling about AI these days, folks? Have you had a go? Are you a regular user of AI? Well, if you're not, then you're probably falling behind. AI has taken farming by storm, and farmers in Australia have taken AI tech up more than any others. Matt, AI is now firmly embedded in Australian agriculture.
Farmers are early adopters. I've seen that throughout the history of farming. Farmers are doing things before people think about them because they've got a certain amount of land. They can't really control that except maybe buy more land off their neighbours. They've got a certain amount of rainfall. They can't really control that, a certain amount of sun. So how do we make ourselves more efficient? Well, they're using technology in a whole range of different ways. We could do an entire episode on all the different ways that farming has adopted technology and in particular AI. I'm just going to run through a few of them today just to give you a bit of a taste of what's happening. But there is so much happening in there, so much research and development, and we've got a big bunch of people around the world to feed. And we aren't getting more land, and we're getting obviously less land as urban sprawl keeps happening. Getting efficiency is important.
We have to be more and more resourceful to feed a population that's really rocketing towards 9 billion.
Yeah, exactly right. So livestock, we've got AI-driven cameras and sensors that monitor livestock 24/7 and can pick up illnesses or animals that aren't feeding properly before humans can. So just by monitoring, just by having these cameras out in the paddock, hey, Farmer Joe, cow number 752, I was thinking of a name there, but maybe they don't know them all by name, 752 is looking a bit poor, or it looks like it's got a certain illness, not walking correctly, its gait's changed, go and have a look at that. So again, just being on top of some of those animals that may not look to the naked eye to be having much of an issue. You've got robotic milking machines because a bit like we mow our lawn each week because it's convenient to do it on weekends, really it's better to mow our lawns more often than that, which people do with robotic lawnmowers. Milking cows has typically been done once a day, early in the morning, because that suits the farmers and they get the milk into the market and all the rest of it. But maybe twice a day, or maybe once every 18 hours, or maybe once every 3 days is better. So they've got radio ID collars that can sense when a cow needs to be milked and then brought into the milking station and then have robotic milkers actually do it all. Wow. So rather than just have a big influx of cows at the same time each morning, it's throughout the day and then you're producing milk at the optimal time. You're not getting the cows when they don't need to be milked and not getting the cows after they need to be milked. So that's pretty cool, I thought. Precision feed station. So you've got a reduction in waste. So why have a bunch of feed just out there for your animals? Why not have precision feeding? Again, checking the health of animals as they do that. AI-guided sprayers. A 96% reduction in chemicals in the trials they've been doing so far because you're just going on looking for...
Say 96% reduction.
Exactly right, because
That's
normally
enormous.
You would just go and spray the entire crop and just have a pesticide or a herbicide that targets just what you're after and leaves the rest of the crop alone. But that's a whole bunch of volume you're putting out there. With this, it goes along and goes, oh, there's a weed, hit it. oh, there's a weed, hit it.
Yeah.
And we've even talked about not using chemicals, using burners to actually do that as well. But again, you've got to find those weeds. You're not going to go along as a farm and go, I'll go for a walk in the paddock today with a little tiny can of spray and just spray individual weeds. But you can do that with the help of AI. We've got robotic innovations from Melbourne University, originally intended for space missions, and now they're used for ag on Earth. You've got fruit sorting technology. AI is going along sorting fruit into different sizes and sorting fruit into defective or overripe fruit. And this might actually, I've got another problem here. This might help solve a problem I have. When I go to the supermarket, why do I buy my avocados per avocado and I buy my mangoes per mango, but I buy my capsicums per weight and I buy my potatoes per weight? Why is there some hierarchy in the vegetable and fruit system where some, even oranges are all pretty much the same shape, but I buy my oranges by weight. I buy my grapes by weight. I get that. I'm not going to count the number of grapes I've got. So I thought maybe it might be because they're different sizes, but it does seem like, I say, oranges and apples are pretty much the same size, but you buy them by weight. But avocados and mangoes you buy by piece. So maybe this will help solve a problem, because if we get rid of the different size fruit, maybe every bit of fruit can be bought by piece rather than by weight. I know it's a first world problem I've got there.
So you buy a load of 58 grapes.
Well, so I accept the fact that weight by grape might be a reasonable thing to do, but I just think of oranges a similar size to a mango or an avocado. But I buy my oranges by weight, but I buy my mangoes and avocados by individual piece. So it's a problem, I know. It's something that's been vexing me when I go to the supermarket.
We need a standard for all our fruit and veg.
We do. So this AI technology, back to the real story, can go through and sort overripe fruit, sort fruit that's different sizes so that you can actually have different types of fruit or different standards of fruit, if you like. So we've got AI helping assess things like climate change, monitoring plant stress, how much is it changing? There's discussion here in where we are that within maybe 20 years, the climate will be the same as maybe it is several hundred kilometres above where we are. We're in the southern hemisphere. So that climate environment we get changes over the decades. Well, what plants are we growing now in our environment compared to the plants we might need to grow as that climate changes? So we're monitoring that type of thing as well. So a whole range of things. Water's probably another one. We know water is going to be a big issue going forward. The availability of potable water, of drinking water, and water used in agriculture as well. So maximising the efficiency of that water, again, checking the amount of moisture in the soil, checking plant health, using AI to monitor all that. And then your big spray, your big circular spray that you'll have going around and watering your crop, you don't just have that going and spraying your crop. You go, I'll now monitor that, and the parts of the ground or the parts of the crop that need additional water get that, other parts don't. So again, it's just all about this efficiency. So quite fascinating. CSIRO has got deep learning models using satellite data to optimise paddock management, predict yields. Cotton leaf traits are being used with AI models to predict fibre yield and insect resistance. It's a whole range of things out there.
Wow.
CSIRO, I think, is a wonderful team we've got there. I'm very lucky to have that in Australia. But I think they're doing a fair bit of good work as well. But lots of private companies, lots of universities. It's a fascinating area at the moment.
Absolutely.
AI in farming.
Yeah. There's been some pretty dramatic footage floating around on social media, you might have seen some, of modern technology blowing up under pressure, much to the light of the critics. So wind turbines, well, they've got to work pretty hard to generate power, and the cost is that they get pretty hot up top. Well, to the cynics that would have us back away from progress in renewable energy sources, turn your wirelesses down now, because it seems that engineers have come up with a solution, and it's coming straight off a 3D printer. Matt, 3D printing to the rescue once again. Who would have thunk it?
And material science. You keep saying it. This is your advice.
Bingo.
I'm sure people are listening to you out there. They're going to material science heavily, because this one, I mean, there's so many combinations of our 93 approximately naturally occurring elements. Take all these different combinations that we can have with those, and wow, what can we produce? We don't really know, because we're finding out so much more. There's a new 3D printed superalloy, and that can be used not just in wind turbines, but in any turbine that might be spinning, might be heat. So it could be used in a jet engine, for example, could be used in a nuclear power plant, could be used in anything that needs that extreme rotation and heat. So you need strength, but you need to be able to handle different environments as well. And some of those environments might be cold and hot. So take a wind turbine. Oh, we'll stop that for maintenance, and it's in a colder area. It might get quite cold. And then you start spinning and it's generating a fair bit of heat. Then suddenly it's getting to very high temperatures. That's where you need something that can handle those variety of temperatures.
Right, yeah.
And you don't have too much expansion or contraction, because normally steel, for example, does expand and contract quite a lot. The clickety-clack of a railway line as you're going along on a railway car is testament to that. But they've got two metals, and I've never heard of these metals, which is, again, these were two starting metals.
So they're not vibranium or what's the other one that they have in Marvel Comics? Anyway, keep going.
No, not any Marvel ones, although maybe. This is Inconel 718 and Rene 41.
Okay, so those would be alloys rather than
metals.
already,
you're quite right, sorry.
Yeah, so an alloy is just a mixture of metals in whatever ratios that you can think of.
So you've got those two alloys, and then they've combined those two alloys to create another alloy, which obviously just means it's an alloy, but it's a superalloy, so it must be really good. And so effectively then they've used a laser-based 3D printing to shape these alloy powders into the functional components. So it sounds like incredibly high tech. They've used a laser blown powder directed energy deposition method to build this alloy layer by layer.
That's excellent. I love it.
But it's quite fascinating. Oak Ridge National Laboratory, if you want to look at more of it. But anywhere you'll need, we talk about turbines, but there are other places where you need high temperature, high stress environments. So it's not just a turbine, but you create these different alloys to suit different things. And again, this is one that will
so 3D printing alloys now.
3D printing
is
alloys.
What we do.
That's right. Yeah.
And you can get your unobtainium. That's the other one I was trying to think of by doing that way.
Yeah. So look, it's quite interesting. What I found fascinating though was most of this research is being backed by the US Department of Energy. So they feel that they need better alloys to be able to produce better ways of producing power down the track. So it wasn't by a CSIRO type, it was by the Department of Energy. So they see a huge need for this.
Fantastic. It used to be that the only essential items that a traveller ever needed was a bunch of traveller's checks, a copy of The Lonely Planet, and a passport belt pouch. Now, of course, all you need is a mobile phone with global roaming data. But what of adventurers with disabilities? Surely adventure travelling is out of the question for them. Well, it is certainly not out of the question now that some clever cookie has created the perfect app for people with accessibility issues, Matt.
There's a whole range of apps here. I'm going to mention a few of them, but I actually thought about this when I was at a show in Sydney the other day called Sister Act. Great show, great musical. And I've become so used to watching captions because my kids, in every movie that we watch, the kids like to have captions on. And
so you yelled out, where are the subtitles?
Well, it was a bit like that because sometimes when you're listening to a musical, they're singing and you just miss a couple of words.
Yeah.
But they're typically quite clever and they're important to the plot. And I missed a couple of words and I glanced down to the bottom of the stage looking for the captions.
For them.
And I went, they're not there. Of course they're not there. You had a live show, you idiot. What are you thinking? But there's an app called Gala Pro, and it does do real-time captions at things like Broadway shows. So you could literally be sitting there and having captions come up. And I assume what it does is it listens and then very quickly interprets those words and then gives you those words on a phone, for example. People say, put your phone away. No, I want to hear what they're saying or I want to read what they're saying. So I thought something like that for someone that might be hearing impaired, might have trouble with hearing. Maybe that's me because maybe I didn't hear all the words properly. But I thought that was quite good. And it was a few years ago, actually, one of my children at university got a part-time job with the university, mapping out around the university how to get from A to B. They were doing some mapping with some mapping software, and it was mainly for people with disabilities so that you got to go from this part of the university to another part of the university, but there were some stairs in the road. Well, that was no good for you. Yeah. So the job of my child was to basically go through and make sure that there were no stairs or no doors that were too skinny to get through and all sorts of things to go through and do all that and map out some of those. So I thought that was quite good, but that was years ago. But now we've got so many different versions of things like that. Accessible Go gives you bookings that are focused on accessible flights, hotels and rental cars. So only flights that you know you can get onto, for example, if you've got a wheelchair or got some sort of mobility issue. You've got Access Now, which helps travellers find accessible locations globally. So I want to book into a B&B, an Airbnb, for example. It'll only give you ones that have got accessibility or for people with wheelchairs. iAccess Life, 10,000 accessible locations across 30 countries. So if you want to travel around, you can go and look at some of these different places. Even Google Maps gives you wheelchair accessible routes and entrances to different locations that are stair-free, which doesn't sound like a bad thing anyway, because stairs sometimes get a bit tiresome. Be My Eyes connects visually impaired users with volunteers over video calls. There's 7.6 million volunteers that are helping out with that. So I thought that was absolutely wonderful.
That's
and then you've even got Apple have got things like sound recognition, door detection functionality, and even live captions on that as well. But my favourite was Gala Pro, because you've got that ability to do live captions on Broadway shows. So, yeah, I thought that was pretty good, because you sometimes forget about it. I don't have a physical disability, so that's me, that's my world.
You take so much for granted.
You do take so much for granted, but for people that do, there are so many things that must be a hassle, must be a pain. And so, again, you think it's great that people are out there thinking about these issues for people that have got some accessibility issues. And, I'm okay now, but I'm getting older, and who knows, 10 years' time I might be struggling to walk up some stairs and have a walking stick, and so I'll be looking out for some of these apps. So, yeah, it's good to see they're out there.
Okay, Matt, I'm going to need a little bit of help with this introduction. Apparently storing numbers is a lot trickier than I thought, and I assume we're talking about storing large numbers here in binary code. But there's now a new system called floating point that'll store numbers without even breaking a sweat. All right, you coding nerds out there, have I got your attention? Matt, am I on track here?
Well, it's interesting. We think about numbers on a computer, and you put in a number and add up another number, and you go, that did that, and you assume it does it accurately.
It does it by magic.
That's right.
And that's what I appreciate about calculators.
And it uses floating point calculation. Now, the problem with floating point calculations is that if you've got very large number ranges and very small number ranges, or something with a lot of precision with lots of decimal points, then, or lots of numbers after decimal point, then it struggles with those two together. So normally if you're working with very large or very small, no problems at all, but putting those two together is a challenge. Floating point is a new technique that allows computers to basically work with very large numbers and very accurate numbers. So my favourite word out of this story is the mantissa. So when you've got different storage bits, so I'll go back a step. A normal floating point calculation has fixed number of storage bits to be able to calculate that. So sometimes it might sacrifice accuracy for a large number because you've only got so many storage bits.
Okay.
Floating point is flexible in its storage bits. So it uses different number of storage bits depending on what numbers you're dealing with. And when you've got a large number of digits after or in the mantissa being the part after the decimal point, that becomes a bit of a challenge if you're dealing with large numbers. Now, why do we care about any of this? When we start to think about some of the models that we use for things that are very big, so I'm talking about weather, talking about climate change, even talking about drugs, when I try and look at a model of what a particular drug will do in the human body is pretty complicated. So it might need incredible accuracy, but also very big numbers. So floating point gives you that ability. Now, this hasn't been adopted by computer systems around the world yet. They're still doing their testing because one of the downsides is that it probably takes a bit more time to do the same calculation. So again, these models where we're using supercomputers to do this, we go, great, we've got more accuracy now, but instead of taking 200 hours of supercomputer time, it's going to take 3 years, then you go, well, maybe this isn't so good. Now, there is a bit of logic to this. We know, we've talked before about the power of quantum computing. That's when you'll start to say, hold on, we've got the power to take that 3-year calculation down to a couple of minutes. Let's make the data more accurate now by using something like floating point calculation. So it's not a Lisp, it's not a stutter, sorry, it's not a stutter. So roll that off at the next barbecue you're at and say, oh, I wonder if that calculation used good old fashioned floating point calculation or floating point calculation, and people will just give you another beer. So it is very technical.
Well, if you want to speak the lingo, you just say F2P. Is that right?
F2P is what you'd normally roll off to your very intelligent friends, but I'm assuming your barbecues.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Oh, yes, of course, F2P alongside those 3 grains of rice. So, so it's amazing though, isn't it? We've had calculators, numbers being used by computers for so long, and still we're coming up with different ways of doing those calculations because what we're trying to do demands different ways of using that raw data, those algorithms.
That's so interesting. Have you seen the new Tesla robot? They call it Optimus, and it certainly walks the walk. But do you remember the original announcement back in 2021 when their big reveal was just a person in a Lycra bodysuit? Well, in late 2024, the Tesla robot has come a long way, but they're still not quite there, Matt.
This is another one of those Thomas Edison moments. We've spoken before about the fact that Edison was well known for making a grand announcement, something was about to happen, and he'd give a time frame on it that was ridiculous, and then he'd go back to his engineers and he'd say, right, I've just promised we can do this. Let's get to it. And then let's say he promised that you'd have a light bulb that would last more than an hour in the next 6 months. Then 3 years later, look at this, I've now got this light bulb that I promised that will last more than an hour. So
the question is, was Edison more of a salesman or an inventor? Yeah.
Well, I think he was very good at creating hype. I have no doubt about the ingenuity and inventiveness of what he did, but he also sold it very well.
Yeah, he was an excellent salesman.
Correct.
Yeah, and part of his success with the light bulb, and we know that he didn't invent the first light bulb, but he invented the most practical light bulb, I guess, was that he convinced everyone to wire their houses when they didn't have wired houses.
Why would I go and put all those wires through my house when I've got a candle?
Yes.
What possible good could that come from, or could come from that? So I think Musk is a little bit like Edison. He likes to make grand announcements, and you referenced that previous time. And look at this robot we've got, which is actually someone dressed up.
In a suit.
And this wasn't a lot different. It wasn't someone dressed up, but when they unveiled Optimus, and they did things like my favourite thing, the thing that I keep talking about, folding clothes autonomously, supposedly, but walking around at an event, talking to people, interacting with people, answering questions like someone said, what's it like being a robot? And the answer was, well, the hardest thing being a robot was learning to behave like a human. Well, not really, because behind the scenes, there were humans controlling these robots. They were actually talking to people from a person talking from somewhere else.
It was a human voice.
That's right.
Not a robot's voice.
It wasn't a robot's voice. It might have sounded robotic because it was being delivered by a robotic type device, but it was really nothing more than a remote controlled device, which is still pretty cool. You've got a device that's remote controlled, but it wasn't talking, acting, behaving, thinking autonomously. It was being controlled elsewhere. So some people have said, great PR exercise. Some people have said, what a scam, what a ruse, what a process from Musk to create a bit more publicity, which, as I said, he's great at doing.
That's right.
But, gee, it'd be nice. I suppose it keeps us talking about it. Here we are talking about it again, but it would be nice just to see, a bit more than a gimmick, something, because I'm desperate. I'm desperate for Rosie the robot to come and pick up the clothes off the floor of my kids' bedrooms and put it in the washer and then fold it up when it comes out. Surely that seems like a reasonable thing for any human to request in this day and age. So we're not there yet, but keep an eye on it. Maybe he's going to be pressured into actually producing something that's real at some stage in the near future, I hope.
Yeah. Something that is actually living up to the promise, perhaps. And that's all we have for you today. I see the credits are starting to roll up from the floor, and this little studio is about to be filled with names and titles, and we won't be able to find our way to the door soon. Thanks, Matt, for another cracking tech talk.
Well, we'll be able to find our way to the door in our new timber building at some stage.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating. I keep thinking about that timber building. I just think we've used timber in buildings for a long time. We still build houses out of timber, but the skyscraper, I'm not convinced that was going to take off.
I love the idea. I love building with wood. I love anything that we can do with wood. Yeah. Anyway, I need to stretch up for an hour or two. I'm off to play Spiderman in the backyard and reclaim something of my youth. Look out, Dr. Octopus. I'm back. And thanks for tuning in to Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk is as good as a home-cooked meal made with only the freshest of ingredients, garnished with the tastiest herbs. but no coriander. That stuff is grown in Hades and harvested by goblins. I feed coriander to my enemies. Anyway, I'm James Eddy, wishing you a happy and productive week until we meet next time, which I sincerely hope will be in exactly 1 week. I don't mean to seem needy, but the show is much better with you on the other end. And when I say that, I know I sound a little bit like a stalker, but let me assure you I'm not. Anyway, mostly not. See you in a week's time, folks.